What I want to do this morning is to start a few years back with the photographic project that I did that was kind of my first foray into engaging in the contemporary world with my work. And then show you images that take it all the way up to the present. And the reason I want to do that is to show you kind of how my own thinking about consumerism and our mass culture has evolved. So what I want to start with is some images from a series that I did called Intolerable Beauty. There we go. And this is a project that I did back when I was still a photographer. And I was working with a large format camera, and I would go out into industrial yards and places where I could find piles of the detritus of American mass consumption. And my hope with this series was to try to capture the scale of our consumer society. Because I realized as I began this project that I was very personally aware of the good side of American consumption, and especially my own consumption. I could see it every day and see the benefits that I was getting from being a consumer. And as I started exploring the piles of our detritus, the waste from the city of Seattle where I'm from, I started to realize that there's this other side to our consumer culture that I had never seen personally before. And I became really interested in that, and I realized it's something that's invisible to most people. And so I wanted to try to bring images of that as a balance. And so this is one of the first images I made in that series. It's just a large pile of garbage. And compositionally, one of the things that I wanted to do with this series, I knew that I couldn't actually convey the real scale of our consumer society in these photographs, because our waste streams are divided out into hundreds of thousands of small waste streams that are invisible to us. You know, our garbage goes away in garbage trucks and goes away someplace that we don't see it again. So there's nowhere where I could go to actually photograph all of the garbage that we create in the United States every year or every day or whatever. So I had to make these images that serve as metaphors for the scale of our garbage. And I had to look for metaphor and symbolism and other ways to try to evoke the enormity of our mass consumption. And so with an image like this, I left almost no sky and almost no ground left to stand on. And the only nature in the image is that tree in the upper corner, which is out of focus. So I used metaphor like that to try to evoke a sense of claustrophobia and the enormity of our consumer culture. This is a place down in Tacoma near Seattle where I live, where they shred cars. They have a car shredder. And they shred hundreds of thousands of tons of cars every month. And they all, the shred goes into ships and off to China where they make new ships, which they then fill up with plastic stuff and send back to us. So as part of this project, I found myself limited by the photographic process. I had to take photographs that were aesthetically within the tradition of photography. And so I was always looking for ways to try to intensify the message and go further or go deeper. And the more work I did on this project, the darker my own experience of it got. And so it went from the brightly colored images at the beginning of the series to sort of more visceral feeling images later on. And I was also, I was always looking for places where the scale of the stuff that I was seeing was so huge that it actually started to take on the features of a geologic feature, where the laws of geology started to apply. So this one, you know, I got a sense of an avalanche or a glacier. This is cell phone chargers. And it was really strange. I went to this facility in Atlanta where there were hundreds of thousands of these cell phone chargers, and virtually all of them had never been used. Not only did they all still work, even the ones that had been used were still perfectly good, but the vast majority of them still had the original twist tie on the wire, the original rubber band that indicated that they'd never even been used. This is computer hard drives. One of the themes that I started working with early on in my Intolerable Beauty series that's continued into my current work is the notion of the near versus the far. And so I want the image to look like one thing when you stand back at a distance, and then as you get up closer, you realize that it's something else. And I think that's a really potent metaphor for our consumerism, because our consumerism, when you stand back at a distance, it looks like all the nice shiny stuff we get to own, the nice cars and the iPods and so on. And then when you walk up close and really examine, then you start to see things like species extinctions, and the mercury in the breast milk of the Eskimo women who live in northern Canada, and so on. It looks different when you get up close, and so that's a metaphor that I work with. This is probably the best known image from my Intolerable Beauty series. When I went to Atlanta to take this photograph, I brought images from the Hubble Space Telescope of, I think it was the Andromeda Galaxy. I spent a few hours in this pile of cell phones arranging the phones, and I wanted to evoke that sense of the enormity of a galaxy and the sense of gravity. And when I spoke about this series in public, when I exhibited and talked with people about it, I realized that there's a limitation on my Intolerable Beauty series that I wanted to try to break through when I did whatever was going to be my next series. And that is that when I would talk about it, I always had to use numbers to sort of bolster my message about the scale of American mass consumption. And so when I showed this image, I would always have to say something like, I don't know how many cell phones this is, but however many is, it's a drop in the bucket of the actual number of phones that we discard in the United States. And the actual number at the time, back in 2005, was 130 million phones a year. And so I found myself using numbers, and then every time I said it, I had this little tweak in the back of my mind that says, I don't even know how many 130 million is. And I'm saying this as a way of trying to advocate something, and yet I don't even comprehend it myself. And so as it came time to do a new series, I kind of walked into this new series of images with this notion that I've been limited so far in my ability to transmit what it is that I'm really trying to transmit. And so what I decided to do was to leave behind the medium of straight photography and to try something completely new. And that is to make these digital composite images that depict the actual quantities of the things that we consume. And so I sold all of my cameras. It was a frightening moment, but I decided I had to commit myself to this, and I had a garage sale and sold all of my large format cameras, and I bought a little digital point and shoot. And I started making images like this. This is an image of 426,000 cell phones, which is the actual number of cell phones that we discard in the United States every single day. And this is, the way I made this is I got a much smaller number. I had just a couple of hundred cell phones, which is maybe about this many phones in a pile. And I put them on the floor of my studio and set the camera up facing straight down on them and lit them from all sides and took a photograph, and then I stirred them around and took another photograph and stirred them around again and took another photograph until I had a few hundred photographs that were all taken at the same scale and with the same lighting. And then I counted up all the phones in a few of the photographs and took an average so I know about how many phones are in each of these small digital images. And then I can accurately depict the total number of this statistic by simply starting to tile them together and then carefully paint out the edges. And so as we slowly zoom in on this image, you'll see that it's a very high resolution image that actually depicts 426,000 phones. And what this technique allows me to do is to depict something that I can't find anywhere in the real world. Even though it's out there, it's divided up into lots and lots of piles. And also to accurately depict a statistic. So that's 426,000 cell phones. And so I started to apply the same technique to other statistics about our mass consumption. So here's a pile of, this is 8 reams of paper, so 4,000 sheets of paper that I put on my studio table and took a photograph, and then I took down the pile and then restacked the pile and made another photograph, and so on, and started building this giant digital composite image of 30,000 reams of paper, which is 15 million sheets of paper, which is the amount of office paper that we use in the United States every 5 minutes. And if you could actually stack up, my print is about 5 by 8 feet, but if you could actually stack up that much paper, here's how big it would be. This is 5 minutes of paper. And there's an hour's worth of paper. You see the two little tiny people down at the bottom left. And there's a day's worth of paper. And you can still see the little tiny people if you look really closely. And they're so small that I lost the sense of scale, so I threw in Seattle's 600-foot Space Needle. That is the amount of paper we use in the United States every single day. And that's not it doesn't include newspapers, magazines, packaging, cardboard, all the other uses of paper. This is just photocopies and memos about how we should conserve paper. So the idea behind this body of work is to take statistics, which are fundamentally dry, emotionless, feelingless, raw data, which is the way we receive most of our information about our consumer culture, about these giant, frightening, profound phenomena that are happening in our world. The way we receive most of that information is through statistics. And my concern is that we aren't feeling it, because we can't feel statistics. Our brains just are not hardwired to be able to comprehend huge numbers. And so when we hear that we use 2 million plastic bottles in the United States every 5 minutes, or 210 billion plastic bottles a year, my own experience of it is that I don't feel it, and I want to feel it. Because the issues that are facing us right now are issues that require our radical changes in behavior as a culture. And if we're going to make radical changes in behavior like that, we're first going to have to feel something. We're going to have to fall in love with these issues. Or we're going to have to be so frightened by them that we finally decide to act, or so angry, or feel so much shame, or whatever it is. We have to feel something. If the only way that we're receiving information about these phenomena is through statistics, then my concern is that we aren't going to feel enough. And so what I'm trying to do with these images is to take these raw data, these statistics, and translate them from the dry language of numbers into a universal visual language of feeling. So here's 60,000 paper bags, which is the number of bags that we use in the US every 5 seconds. And if you could pile them all up, that's 5 seconds worth of bags. And there's a minute. And I tried going to an hour and to a day, and the people became smaller than 1 pixel the very next iteration of it. That's 1 minute's worth of plastic bag use. I took my camera and went outside on a clear day and photographed jets flying overhead and just started layering them on top of each other until I had 11,000 jet trails, which is the number of commercial jet flights in the United States every 8 hours. And I tried doing a full day. I called up the FAA to find out how many jet flights are there every day, and they said between 33 and 34,000. So I tried 33,000 all layered on top of each other and just turned into a white mass. You couldn't even see what it was anymore, so I had to back off just so you could tell what it was into 1/3 of a day. So it's actually 3 times that many flights we have every day. I went to the University of Washington recycling department and got a car full of plastic bottles and brought them home and dumped them in my driveway and started applying the same technique. I shot these ones in perspective this time because I wanted it to zoom off to the horizon, and finally put together an image of 2 million plastic bottles, which is 5 minutes of plastic bottle use in our country. That's got to be one of the more insane practices that, as a culture, that we're engaging in right now, is shipping water around from other countries and within our own country at tremendous environmental expense, when the water out of the tap anywhere in the United States is better quality, it's more healthy to drink than the water from these plastic bottles. It's just the strangest thing that we're all doing together. And there's 5 minutes of the result. So this is a 2007 version of pointillism. This image is made up of 106,000 aluminum cans. So we're going to zoom in on that blue umbrella right there in the middle. $106,000 aluminum cans is the number of cans we use in the US every 30 seconds. And the print of this, I tried to make it as close in size to the original Seurat painting as I could. But the print of it it's about 5 by 8 feet. But if you could actually pile up 106,000 cans, that's how big it would be. 70 feet by 100 feet of aluminum cans that we use every 30 seconds. So there's a minute's worth of aluminum cans. And there's an hour, and it starts getting pretty abstract. But remember that each one of those is 70 feet high and contains 106,000 aluminum cans. So here's a day's worth. And it gets totally abstract there. And so what I did was I actually measured how tall would that be if you could actually make a pile of that many cans. And it's almost a mile high by almost a mile wide. So I threw in the Empire State Building and some of Manhattan's skyline to give you a sense of how much aluminum that is. That is 1 day's worth of aluminum cans. And the aluminum can industry is very proud of the fact that about half of that is recycled. But the problem with that is that half of it isn't recycled. And so we waste half of that much aluminum every single day in the United States just drinking commercially processed sugar water and piss quality beer. Here's the logo font from a GMC Yukon Denali SUV. I took pictures of a white one and a black one and a whole bunch of gray ones in between. And tweaked around with the letters a little bit. And I started assembling this one into a giant image of 24,000 GMC Denali logos. And this is Ansel Adams' famous photograph of Mount McKinley in Denali National Park. My hope with this one is to juxtapose the sacred Denali against the truly mundane Denali. And I don't want to pick specifically on GMC or on the Denali or on any particular product. It isn't, there's not something special about aluminum cans or about office paper. Imagine being at the electronics counter of a Walmart, and you're standing there, and there's this gigantic line of cell phones and this other gigantic line of digital cameras. And over there is a whole line of printers and laptops. And then there's a whole department of cosmetics and Nikes and jeans and barbecues. Every single one of these products has a similar scale associated with it. And if you can imagine yourself levitating out of the Walmart, I don't want to pick on them alone either. Imagine that's in a shopping center where there's a Target and a Kmart and all of the other stores that we shop at. Every single one of these products has a scale like that associated with it. And when you start to really think about the quantities, it's not hard to imagine why it is that our environment is under the stress that it's under, and why it is that America is so hated by people in other cultures and around the world. Why it is that Al-Qaeda is going after us. They're not going after Brazil and India and China and other countries that are the same size as ours, Russia and Indonesia and so on. One of the things about my work that I want to talk a little bit about is there's a theme in there. There's a kind of a subliminal theme that I'm trying to pass along. And it's the relationship between the individual and the collective. And in every one of these images, there's that aspect where you can stand back and see the entire image. You can see the collective. You can see it all at once. And then as you walk up, you see that the collective is made up of lots and lots of individuals. And that there aren't any individuals in the collective that play more of a role than any others. And it's my way of affirming the role, of sanctifying the role of the individual in today's society. Because our society is so huge and so overwhelming, and it's getting bigger and bigger all the time. And we're learning more and more information about the complexity of our society all the time. And the more we learn about it and the bigger it gets, the more kind of pressure there is on the individual to feel like they don't matter. Like, I'm too small to matter. I'm too insignificant. What I do isn't going to matter. And if there's one thing that I wish as my own life's work, one message that I want to pass along, it's that the individual matters. And I have this metaphor in my mind of a gauge that we each have. And there's a needle on the gauge that's either over on this side or it jumps over to this side. And when it's on this side, it's I don't matter. And when it's over on this side, it's I do matter. And there's, depending on where your needle is on that gauge, there's a whole set of behaviors that just automatically flows from that worldview. If you feel like you don't matter, then my vote doesn't matter. I won't bother voting. And if I try to do something good for the world, it isn't going to make any difference because there's so much bad going on in the world. And if I do something bad, that's okay because it's going to be a big sacrifice for me to change my behavior, and it's not going to matter because there's so many people doing bad stuff anyway. That's the I don't matter side. And in the I do matter side, then my vote does matter. And everything that I do that's good does make a little tiny difference. And if I'm doing bad things, then I can change because it will make a difference. And if 300 million of us decide that we do matter, then all of a sudden the revolution happens. In my last few minutes, I want to share with you something that I've experienced as a result of showing this work and talking about it. My Running the Numbers, that's what this series is called, is Running the Numbers. And this series has received a truly astonishing public response, which, in my own view, it far exceeds the actual artistic merit of the work. And what I believe about it is it's reflective of this craving on the part of our culture right now. There are millions of people who have seen my work. My website is getting more than 250,000 visitors a month. And I've been contacted by magazines and documentary filmmakers and people all over the country and all over the world. I get hundreds of emails a day. And so my work has become kind of a hub in the movement. And it's not the hub, because there are lots and lots of hubs, but it's a hub. And so I've gotten to meet a lot of the people who are the leaders of this consciousness change that is happening in our culture, and to see it. And so I feel like I'm in this privileged position of being like a forest ranger in one of those lookout towers that's at the top of a mountain, where I can actually look out and see the entire forest. I can see the movement. And I want to tell you, it's the most incredibly moving and inspiring and beautiful thing to get to see. Because in rooms just like this, all over our country, there are passionate people who are engaged with these issues, that are doing things about it. Millions and millions of people are coming together and deciding, I'm going to evolve. I matter. I'm going to change myself from somebody who is a self-centered consumer to being a compassionate, connected member of the human community. There are teachers in elementary schools and middle schools and high schools and in universities who are teaching this stuff and who are starting recycling programs. And there are magazines who are writing articles about it all over the world in every single kind of magazine. And it's spreading inside companies, inside little companies. Little mom and pop shops are going green. And there are green people who have made it into the highest positions in some of the biggest corporations like Starbucks and Walmart and McDonald's, and that are affecting fundamental policy changes in those companies. There are documentary filmmakers who are making films about it, and there are poets who are writing poetry about it. Authors are writing books about it. This movement it's actually happening, and it's just incredibly inspiring to see it. I believe 10 years from now that this world is going to be a different place. It's going to be unrecognizable from the way it is now. And so, as the first speaker in this conference, one thing that I want to bring is a feeling of hope. I'm filled with hope and optimism. I think 25 years from now, we're going to be able to look back and remember that we were at the leading edge of this wing. We were the people who were teaching our friends, teaching our families, who were spreading this message that going green is not a sacrifice. It's actually something that brings us well-being. It makes our life better. It brings joy, and it connects us to the earth and with each other. And that's how this message is spreading out to the other 300 million people in our country and around the rest of the world. We're going to look back in 25 years, I think, with a tremendous feeling of pride and satisfaction that we participated in this deep cultural movement that is changing the world. I look forward to connecting with each one of you.